Matt, we're going to explore today whether data centers are a good thing. And I'm about to run a panel at an event for our company Adapt, where it's talking on the economic value that comes from data centers. And when everybody knew I was doing that assignment, everyone around me be sending me newspaper clippings about all the opposition to data centers around the world, including the fact now that Erin Brockovich is on the case for against data centers in the United States. And perhaps Julia Roberts has got her next Oscar lined up against data centers. But Matt, what do you think is the economic value that we get from data centers?
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of step back a bit. You know, the whole explosion of data centers was really fueled by the cloud, the cloud sort of boom, 10, 15 years ago, whatever, where a lot of organizations looked to offload workloads into these sort of hyperscaler cloud environments, AWS, Azure, Google, these kind of platforms. So it's not necessarily a new thing. And I would say that absolutely they have driven significant economic value, particularly, obviously, for the companies that build the data centers, right? And sell the space and sell the equipment. But I would also say that undoubtedly, cloud has really driven a lot of economic value and benefit and capabilities for organizations and society as a whole. But where we are right now, Peter, is really, it's kind of almost cloud on steroids. You know, we see what's happening because the compute power required to fuel AI models, LLMs, from the likes of, ChatGPT, Copilot, Anthropic, Claude, whatever, is astronomical compared to what we've historically seen. So the requirement for data centers is absolutely going through the roof. However, when you talk about economic value, the economic value is certainly there in terms of AI helping us drive greater productivity and capability and output. So that economic value is there. But the organizations who are investing in these data centers have invested billions, multi billions into these build outs for what they expect to come in many ways. And we saw this with cloud, in the early days, massive build out. We saw overcapacity. We saw cloud, we saw data centers kind of sitting empty. So I'm not saying we're at that point right now, but what I would say is that a lot of the economic value from these data center build outs today is forecast to come tomorrow.
Well, it's future-proofing us in some ways. But Matt,
I don't know if it's future-proofing us, Peter.
All right, well,
it's preparing us for a future particularly the vendors will hope will come, basically, because that's when they start getting their economic value.
That's right.
Because if that future doesn't come, they've done their proverbials, basically.
That's right. The leap of faith might not come true.
Indeed.
But, I think the issue that I have, though, with the panel when I explored people, I was talking to these people, is this value that's coming out of the data centers? Why do these data centers need to be in Australia? Why can't they be somewhere else? There's talk of putting them on the moon. And the question I got back, or the response I got back from the people I was talking to, was actually this concept that there's a sovereign capability. It's almost the Straits of Hormuz argument. If you're not in control of something, then you're at the mercy of someone who does hold those cards. And the argument about sovereign, why do we need to worry then about sovereignty for data centers when we don't worry about sovereignty for AI models or sovereignty for hyperscalers or equipment that we use or mobile phones? And the argument they're sort of talking to me is it's actually data is the issue. We need to have ownership of our data in Australia because that's very sensitive. I don't know if that argument resonates with you.
What's that brand of beer? Furphy.
Furphy, that's right.
You know whether it's a Furphy or not, Peter, at the end of the day.
Well, indeed.
I would say that absolutely, I kind of buy into the sovereignty piece. However, I think it's kind of being used as, this is why, because it allows sovereignty. But by having the data centers housed in Australia, does that by default mean that everything's going to stay in Australia? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the models are in Australia. We're sharing data from Australia outside Australia and back again. So you can certainly create sovereign cloud environments. But the whole thing about AI is that you need to. It's only as good. You only get out as good as what you put in
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So I think sovereignty is kind of being bandied around with gay abandon at the moment, Peter.
Well,
as a reason.
No, and I sense your skepticism, but I think what I'm feeling is that actually data sovereignty and having data in Australia, particularly things like medical records, police records, all of that need to be resident in Australia, and they need Australian data centers to house that data because it is so sensitive.
But the question is whether we've got enough data centers right now for that purpose. This is a different purpose, right? This is not just for data sovereignty. This is to build the compute power to enable organizations and indeed individuals to leverage AI effectively. And I would say that, of course, it has a lot to do with data sovereignty, data integrity, but also it has a lot to do with egress and ingress, the costs of moving data around as well. So you have the data centers in Australia, that reduces the cost of doing that. I think also at the end of the day, there's just this kind of, Sam Altman came in. We talked about this a while ago. Sam Altman came to Australia and said, we tick all the boxes to be able to be an environmentally friendly data center based country. We've got sun, we've got solar, we've got wind, we've got plenty of water, of which we haven't, right? Okay, but so a lot of what we're talking about also is planning for when we have different styles of data centers, so we're not so resource intensive. And I'll give you an example. So there's a company called Cloud Carrier, and they're very much selling that sovereign sort of story as well. They have a very large site in Moss Vale. So we're here in Miscong, so kind of just down the road in Moss Vale. Cloud Carrier kind of been building out. They have one data center running already, and they're leveraging sort of power to do that. But their proposal right now into not just local government, into the sort of state government, is to expand that to, I think, maybe 2 or 3 data centers. But as part of that, they're talking about building a gas-powered kind of basically generator to run these data centers. And the argument is that they're then not drawing on the grid. However, this gas power station is essentially going to be one of the largest power stations in the southern hemisphere.
Well,
the point I'm making here is about getting at the environmental piece. Is that none of this comes without cost. So I had a briefing from we've got this group called the Southern Highlands, Silicon Highlands rather, where we get together. It's all tech experts who live in the Silicon Highlands and Southern Highlands. Then Cloud Carrier percentages, great presentation. So I'm kind of thinking, this isn't a bad idea. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring capabilities to the Southern Highlands. And then 1 or 2 people were kind of really questioning the environmental impacts. Not necessarily that it was going to, burn down the town or whatever, but and I've thought about that this morning. If you're I live up back onto fields, someone chucks a gas power station in those back fields.
Yeah.
What happens to my house?
Well, exactly.
So there's quite a lot of pushback happening here.
There's a couple of things I've had when I spoke to people about this, and certainly in the environmental issues, but also this sort of pushback against data centers that we're seeing in communities. One argument that came to me was actually AI is an intangible concept to some people, but data center is something you can see and is visible. So is your opposition to data centers really a reflection of your opposition to a world that's being driven by AI? And so that's a way that you can show your resistance to that world by attacking data centers. That was one argument I heard.
I think your average, Mr. and Mrs. Joe Blow don't think like that in general. I think it's more of that kind of tangible data center, and sort of, it's like anything. At the end of the day, we want to use electricity, right? And the cost of that is we're polluting the environment. But we realize, that's kind of that's the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
We still want this, and I think AI is very similar to that as well. But I think, to your point, generally, I think most people are just shutting their mind off to how they get this stuff. What's the classic thing? You do a search. Used to be you do a search on Google. It's like it's one kettle boil every time you do a search.
Yeah,
that's the power being used, right? And AI is kind of that on steroids at the end of the day.
So the other argument I had is that actually this is an opportunity for us to I suppose, create the framework for a clean energy environment in the world going forward. A vision for where we can be as a country.
Yep.
And I think part of the challenge we have, it's such a polarizing issue. This culture wars in Australia have been going on for 30 years. And not just in Australia, they're happening in America, they're happening in the UK. It's almost a sort of right versus left argument that we're seeing. And the argument I'm getting is actually the environmental demands of data centers give us a chance to sit down. How can we plan this effectively? Because as one person said to me, we haven't got an energy production problem in Australia. What we've got is an energy transmission problem.
Yeah.
There's spare capacity on a grid in certain parts of Australia. There's oversupply, undersupply in other areas. How can we optimize that environment? And the need for data centers gives us the opportunity to rationalize that environment more effectively.
It does if the people building the data centers embrace that.
Yeah.
And again, coming not bagging on Cloud Carrier, but coming back to Cloud Carrier here in Mossvale, using the gas-powered generators. And I had a conversation with, I think it was the CIO of the Clean Energy Commission, whatever, in Canberra a few weeks ago on a round table. And I was saying, surely that's a good thing, right? That they're doing this. It's not going to put a strain on the grid. He said, no. He said, I would prefer them all to be using energy from the grid, because as the clean energy operator, I can then counter that.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well,
and I can work that into my planning.
Well, it's interesting because one of the people I interviewed is Belinda Dennett, who's the sort of CEO of the Data Center Council. And Belinda's argument is she doesn't want separate energy supplies for local data centers. She wants it part of the overall energy production, because she thinks that gives us the opportunity to optimize it, not break ourselves up into fiefdoms, I suppose.
Yeah, indeed. That's the point that this guy was making as well. And that's one of the... Because again, blindly, I kind of thought, yeah, it's probably a good idea. It's not going to put the strain on things. But then the counter is, as you heard from Belinda, they can plan for that.
Yeah,
they can offset it and have it into their sort of offset plans as well.
But the argument then comes, Matt, how do local communities, how does a Mossvale community get something back into their coffers for having a data center in their midst? Because we all know they're not going to employ lots of people. That they're going to be very spartanly run. And one of the arguments that I heard from, and this was from a data center operator, he said, well, maybe there should be some form of token tax. So when
there's that token word again.
Yeah, it is. So we're not going to go away with it. We spoke about that last time. But one of the things that he was saying is, if the query goes offshore, then there's a modest token cost that comes back to local communities in Australia for that transaction. If the transaction happens within Australia, then there's no token tax. So there's some sort of advantage, because
I'm getting my cynical.
Well,
my
you
cynicism
are,
going through the roof, Peter. Because of course, the data center operator in Australia is going to say that, because that's driving his data center.
Well, but he's also making a point, Matt, that the richest men in the world all reside in Silicon Valley, and they're not needing any more money than they've got already. Right. And so we in communities in regional Australia, we've got to think about what is the value for Australia? How do we sustain and grow these communities?
So sorry, I'll take my cynical hat off here.
Yeah, well, that's a release.
And I'm a data center guy for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily, I'm not a skeptic, but what I would say here is that, so when you're talking about this token, into kind of tokenization,
I'm not talking. He was suggesting.
I know he's talking about, but we won't name him.
Yeah,
larger than life character. So when we talk about these kind of tokens, are we then suggesting that the revenue from those tokens goes back to the community, not the data center operator?
That's right. It goes back. Yeah, it goes back to the community. It's for one of a term, it's a state or federal tax that goes back into the coffers of the state and local and federal government. So, and that then can get reinvested into communities.
So who pays for that token?
Well, it's the transaction cost. I haven't worked it out, but that was his suggestion to me.
So basically, is that the data center operator is giving a cut of their profits back to the community?
No, I need to defend the integrity of this person I interviewed. He said, I wouldn't be averse to our idea of a token tax on small token tax, he said, on transactions that go offshore from data centers in Australia.
Okay, so token tax goes offshore.
Yeah.
So we're then charging the overseas operators.
Yes, that's right.
I'm with you. Okay, all right. So we're not giving them a credit if they use it onshore.
No.
We're taxing them for going offshore.
Sure, yes, that's
so
right.
there's no overhead to the local data center operators at all.
No,
This
that's-
is coming back from the 4 richest men who I know you love. You love to.
That's right. We've got deep pockets.
Okay. So I'm fine on that, but I'd have to understand the some of the nuances in a bit more detail.
Well, here's a couple of other questions to finish this session on that. The first one I've got is, why do you think the data center operators have underestimated the amount of opposition they're getting to these data center proposals? Are they pushing through too aggressively and not bringing the community in consultation with them? Are they not working with the planning authorities to actually work where the best places are for data centers? And the final question I've got for you is, where is there a line we should draw? Are there data center proposals that should be rejected because they're outside certain criteria?
Yeah, I mean, big questions. I mean, firstly, Peter, it always comes back to that classic, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
Right? You're building a data center in a backyard, or you're building a data center, over in northwestern Sydney or whatever, close to the metro line, where you could be building houses and got a housing crisis. So what's the benefit to the community that you're doing that? And it's not just about giving them money back. It's how's it going to enrich their lives and make it better? And I don't think anyone's really thinking about that in this kind of blind rush to build data centers for these predictions of what we're going to need.
Yeah.
And again, I'll come back to what I said at the beginning. We're predicting what we're going to need, or are we building to not enable what we need, but actually drive what we use?
Yeah, well, self-fulfilling in some ways.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, that's right, at the end of the day. So there is certainly a degree of that coming in. I think a lot of the local governments and planning or whatever, they're also they're not really considering the long-term view. We'll come back to what we talked about with Steve Hodgkinson, what you and I have talked about a lot, that short-termism kind of mindset on many things. We're thinking, yeah, this is a great idea now. It's going to bring money into the government, bring money into to the community potentially. But longer term, we're not thinking about the potential impact of what this could have. And we haven't even put in place, the policy, the guardrails around AI itself.
Yeah.
Yet we're building as if it's just going to be everything in the future.
And we work in an industry that coined the term vaporware, so we never quite know what we're going to need or what's going to happen in the future.
Absolutely. And that makes me think maybe that's a good topic for a 60-second boon or bust take on AI washing, Peter.
Well, there we go. There we go. Thank you.